All right, I'd like to call the committee at home meeting for Monday, June 16th, 2025 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gavino.
Here.
Trustee Christensen.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowry. Sorry.
Not here.
Trustee Nedved.
Here.
Trustee Salazar.
Here.
All right, thank you. Audience comments? Seeing none, trustee comments? All right, moving on to discussion. Item 1, Steve.
Thank you. Item number 1 is an update to our contracts ordinance for public works. Also would affect our purchasing policy. So basically the gist starts with the state allows you to pass an ordinance. So it does, you don't have to, but it allows municipalities to pass an ordinance that requires you to bid out supplies, public works contracts, or public works construction projects $25,000 or more. Most towns have that. We have that. We also have a provision in that same ordinance that says that all of our procurement is done by purchasing policy as set by the village board. As you know, the purchasing policy is something we're proud of because we bring it back every time we think there needs to be a tweak. We bring it back to the board and we have a discussion. So what happened was we're sticklers for the rules. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that the board wants us to be doing. So when we did the purchase of the trucks tonight, it raised a question internally about whether or not you actually have to waive bids for vehicles. Because once again, the requirements by ordinance that we adopt were supplies, contracts, and construction. So we did a deep dive with Kevin, our attorney, and as we went through it, there's some ambiguity as to whether or not a vehicle or equipment actually falls into supplies. Some people might view supplies as being sand or salt or things that are a resource that are replenished. Then we found a separate definition in the state law that talked about towns of over 500,000 having to bid out supplies, contracts, construction works, and equipment, and they specifically put the word equipment in that definition, which led us to believe that equipment's not under ours. So we decided to bring this to the board tonight because in the past, years ago, and I'm going to go back to pre-COVID, 5 years ago, we'll say, the standard for municipalities was simple for vehicles. You looked at the state purchase, you said, okay, what vehicles do I want? If I'm a police department, I probably want a Ford Explorer or a Chevy Caprice or whatever at the time. And you look to see if someone bid that exact model out. And then you put your order in. You had pricing already set through some procurement process. You didn't do any other vetting to see if that price was actually the best price. You just simply went off the state bid, brought it to the board, and said, here you go, board. We like this vehicle. And then you got it within 3 to 6 months, a reasonable timeline. With supply chain issues and whatnot, as everyone remembers, things like public works plow trucks started to take 2 years or more to sometimes get these trucks. And then sometimes the state bid person wouldn't even be able to fulfill the actual contract. So leading us to at one point canceling a contract after like 1.5 years of waiting for it. So we got smart, and what we did was we started using our purchasing policy more for things like vehicles and equipment. And we started looking around the country for purchasing of vehicles and said, okay, like our police squads, if Ford Explorers are hard to come by and there's a year waiting list just to get on the waiting list, what about Dodge Durangos, which some towns have used in the past? Oh, we have a local dealer that does Dodge Durangos. Let's go look at what pricing we can get from them, compare it to what we see in state bidding for the similar vehicles. And if I remember correctly, they were within like $1,000 of each other for each squad. And we were able to get it from a local person and get them within 6 months as opposed to like 1.5 years or 2 years. Tonight's purchases were good examples of Brian's team doing research. The pickup truck we bought was 1 year old, but brand new still, never used, but cheaper than this year's state bid price for a brand new model. And then the 1 ton, which is fully furnished already, I should say furnished is like you're buying an apartment. But fully furbished, it's all there and ready to go off the lot. It's 2 years old, but never been driven, but still cheaper than the state bid this year by a significant amount. So what we came to the board to do is we just want to clarify in our ordinance and the purchasing policy, we essentially want to put in that supplies does not include vehicles, nor does it apply to equipment. However, those purchases still have to follow our normal purchasing policy, which means Brian, still, if it's over $25,000, we still have to bring it to the board for approval, and you still have to make attempts for 3 quotes minimum, so the board will see competitive pricing still when we try to do these things. It's just more or less clarifying that vehicles and equipment are not supplies. And I probably stole most of Jason's presentation, but you're more than welcome to go forward.
Yeah, so real quickly, as Steve mentioned, the first starting point of what we try to decide whether or not is a vehicle supplies, we looked at the statute. And the statute is referenced within our purchasing policy, and it mentions that municipalities less than 500,000, corporate authorities may provide an ordinance that supplies needed for the use of the municipality shall be furnished by contract let to the lowest bidder. We do have that ordinance we'll look at in a second here, but that still kind of left it open for us as to what is a supply. But then when we looked at the statute for municipalities over 500,000, or City of Chicago, they specifically break out equipment or supplies. So they looked at it as equipment or vehicles is something different than a supply. So from there we said, okay, well then vehicles probably, from the statute point of view, isn't considered a supply. And there's nothing else in the statute we found for the municipalities for less than 500,000 that it mentioned anything about equipment or supplies having to be, seek sealed bids via newspaper or any kind of notification. So we went to the village's ordinance, and the section 3.40.010 mentions public works contracts, improvements, projects, and purchases of supplies are over $25,000 shall be purchased from the lowest bidder due to notice for advertising. So again, once we determined that supplies weren't vehicles and equipment, what we wanted to do is we wanted to add this section down here, just right after this, saying the purchase of vehicles and equipment are not considered supplies subject to the formal bidding process, but are required to follow the village's purchasing policy. And basically what that means is we're not trying to circumvent going out and getting bids for when we're buying vehicles and supplies. We're just trying to say our purchasing policy says that anything over $25,000, we need to go out getting three written quotes, and then it comes back to the board for approval, showing you that we got the thing. We're just saying that when we go out buy a vehicle, we don't want to put an advertisement or notice out there saying, hey, all dealerships, send us your sealed bids. We're going to open them in 3 weeks and just see which dealership sent the lowest bid for the thing. We're going to actually go out and see who has what we want, who has it on the lot now, can we get it immediately, and we're going to try to follow the purchasing policy going that way with our other purchases.
I'm fine with it.
So then just to kind of complete the loop here, we went to our purchasing policy, which has similar language, and I highlighted here to that statute mentioning the projects and purchase of supplies over $25,000, the sealed bids. So all we're going to do is we're going to keep this language the same, but I want to add a sentence, a section afterwards, basically saying the purchase of vehicles and equipment are not considered supplies subject to the formal bid process. Then we borrowed some language from the mobile food vendor, basically defining what a vehicle is. Vehicles, motorized vehicles, non-motorized, carts, bicycles, trailers. And then we just put a simple definition of what's considered equipment, just tangible personal property to be used as various activities. So basically going forward, we just want to, similar to how we did tonight, when Brian or anybody wants to buy a vehicle, they would go out and they would find the vehicles that meet our specifications, get bids. Sometimes we might actually use the state, like the group bids or the state bid purchase contracts, if that's favorable for us, but we just want to make the process a little easier and not have to go out and get sealed bids and advertisements for buying vehicles and equipment.
I just had one question. So, propelled by humans or animals, so like Stagecoach or what are we thinking of as far as
We just
animals?
tried to keep, there's probably nothing we'll ever buy like that, but we just tried to keep it so open that there can never be a question of what applies or doesn't
I'm
apply.
not sure if it'll be Humane Society will like having something propelled by an animal, but
Yeah.
okay. Just wondering why that was in there.
Yeah, no, just to be consistent with other language that defines vehicles that we already have in the code, just to
My
make
guess
them
is from the
exact
mobile
same.
food vendor license, when we took that out, it's probably because there is a possibility of some kind of food cart being propelled by a person, like a hot dog cart on wheels or something where someone's riding the bike behind it.
Or a donkey or something.
Rickshaw pulling.
Rich.
When all the electric cars die, you never know.
Yeah, right. You don't know. Sounds good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yep. All right, item 2, Steve.
Item number 2 on the agenda tonight, I'm going to take the cord. Thanks, Nathan. So as we were building or doing the aesthetics for the Public Works facility, we've always said that function is the most important thing. The building needs to look nice. It's across from homes. But function, it's taxpayer money, right? So let's make sure that it functions the best first, and then make sure it also looks okay, but want to make sure that the function's there. So we looked at ways to save money in the beginning, and one of those was we put money aside for a monument sign. So just like Village Hall has one, the police department has one. Public Works currently does not have a monument sign at the current facility, but at the new one, we put money in there. It's earmarked for like $45,000 for the sign. So in the way that the architectural rendering from our architect was, it's, you know, brick rendering, so it looks like a brick facade, so it looks like the building. What we asked, though, is was there a cheaper option by simply just putting lettering directly on the building? And the architect said, well, sure, we can try to find a place on the facade of the building, but we'd want to make sure that it's at least noticeable, so at night it's backlit, just like a monument sign would be lit. We'd like to make sure that it's backlit on the wall so you can see it, because it would be the only sign at the building. So right now, they just put an estimate of $25,000, and in this picture here, you could see that was the original, just a rendering. It doesn't mean the sign was going to look like that, but that was just the idea, a monument sign in front of the building. And then what we did is, sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. There we go. So we asked them if they could put lettering directly on the building and save, you know, $16,000 potentially. So that's what they did. That's over the mechanics bay. And honestly, it reminds me a little bit of the police department. So the police department has signage in 3 different areas. They have, when you're first coming in off Airport Road, they have a monument sign. When you're on 31, they have a retaining wall that faces Route 31, and it says North Aurora Police on it. And then this is more reminiscent of when you go into the parking lot and you look at the building, and on the facade of the building right above the vestibule walking in, it says North Aurora Police Department. I mean, in all honesty, those are big letters, people will see it. I just want to make sure before we change any aesthetics to the building that the board is okay with this, or if you want me to keep the monument sign.
I like it. Can we add the logo to it?
Oh, yeah. We can add the logo if the board wants us to, and we probably do it in black because I think the lettering's black.
So is this the picture of the sign where, in the daytime, and then the next picture in
Correct.
the package is when it's backlit? Okay.
Yeah, so let's see if it, so they were trying to show how it's
Like when it
backlit
gets
at
dark
night,
outside.
yeah.
Okay.
And we can see if we can do, and we obviously can do a color version of our logo. So if the board has any idea that you'd rather do it in color, that's fine. The letters are black. We also provide our logo in all white or all black, depending on the situation. So usually if we use all black lettering, we usually use the black version of the logo on the side of our trucks.
Well, I mean, it would be nice, I guess, if it was, so if you put it in color, then does that just then increase the cost, I would assume?
I honestly don't know if it's just aluminum, like, I don't know if what the sign material is, if that's really going to make a big difference.
I would keep
Might be
it solid
similar.
black.
It might be similar to like the black one that's on the wall out here on Village in the
lobby.
There's the black one downstairs. So I mean, if you did it all black, it would probably be similar looking to that.
The monument sign right out front here, the logo is in color.
Correct.
I couldn't remember, but Jason just looked.
Y'all want the logo? Logo, a good
I think
idea?
it's a great idea, yeah.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark,
I'm good, yeah.
color, black?
I'd stick with black. Colors fade.
No preference,
I
personally.
don't really have a preference either,
I
but
don't have a
black sign
preference.
Black.
against the building.
As long as it's big enough,
Yeah.
you'll see
So
it.
if it's backlit, it would look yellow like that, or that's just how it looks in the picture?
That's a good question. I mean,
I think
it's
that's
the
how it looks in the picture, so they could get it. I mean, I think it's tough for them to get like a true, picture of the letter. So I think,
So it's
this
just
is
white
basically,
lights
just a
backlit.
CAD
I
CAD
mean, I
drawing.
think that would look good. I mean, I'm
You have the address somewhere?
That's the thing, we would probably end up putting like the address above the door, because, somewhere like that where you could actually probably physically see that.
Yeah.
So probably either be some sort of, sticker thing, right over the
I would assume right here
on the
by
glass.
the
Yeah.
door, by the vestibule.
Somewhere
Or
right
on the
there.
windows, maybe even like, how they have them in the windows sometimes.
Like etched on it.
Although I'm
Don't you
not
think
maybe
black
a
would
fan
look
of
better?
Sticker.
Because it's a lighter building and black
Right,
would be
would
more of a
stand out.
contrast, would stand out.
This rendering was the old rendering when they were first designing the building. So that color scheme, it did darken to more of this tone of gray.
Oh, okay, so what color is that? That looks like black lettering, isn't it?
The garage doors will be black as well. So that the rendering of that is.
It looks really cohesive with the black, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From this rendering.
Anything else?
No,
So black,
that's it.
black's good, okay. All right, item 3, Steve.
So item number 3 is one of our other policies that we bring back periodically, the Economic Development Incentive Policy. It's part of our larger economic development strategy. This is in lieu of having to bring requests that are unqualified or that are qualified but don't really have a lot of merit. Instead of bringing them to the board every single time, which was the issue we were running into, as the board knows, you looked at 2 recent ones, that at the staff level, we may have had some questions about whether or not to bring them forward. And just based on our policy of what's unqualified and what's qualified. But originally when you designed this, we wanted to make sure that we never overstepped our boundaries and that the board always had a final say. But what it led to was basically people asking for money where they, on the staff perspective, we were looking at, we're like, I'm not sure that money makes sense in this case because I think the project's still moving forward. That happens, believe it or not, with qualified uses too. So what we did is we went back and we updated our strategic policy here on when we offer incentives, and we put a caveat on there that basically says that here's that chart. Once again, I know it's, as John Laskowski said, just small enough for no one to be able to read it. Let me just see if I can blow it up a little bit. So there's your qualified uses and your qualified different types of expenses that we allow. We don't allow those unqualified uses now. It gives the staff ability to look at it and say, okay, it doesn't matter if you have a qualified use. If you also are unqualified, so you have 2 different uses on your property, but one's unqualified. Now, unless there's an absolute merit to the village, the staff can say, no, you're still unqualified. Or if you come in and you just say, I'm a convenience store, you say, no, you're clearly unqualified. The board has said you're unqualified. The board can obviously update this at any time. You can ask me to come back and we'll go back and look at it. But really what we did was we wanted to make sure, so the changes are right here in the very beginning. We put it right at the top. Everything still has to be obviously approved by the village board. That's first and foremost. The second is we basically put in the review process. So there's a step-by-step review process at the bottom, but it really just said that's the process before it goes to the board. Now there's a process of vetting it out to determine if it should even make it to the board. So this basically says that, when I say the village administrator, the team is really Mike Toth. Nathan's involved quite a bit, Jason's involved, and then myself. And the 4 of us will collectively look at it from different angles. And we'll look at it and first determine if it's qualified or unqualified. And if I say, no, this is unqualified, at that point we just let them know, sorry, you're an unqualified use at this time. If they're qualified, I still would look at it and say, okay, is there a reason to bring this forward? Or is it just because it's a restaurant doesn't mean we have to have it? Meaning, and I'm going to use an example, we had a restaurant years ago who called us up and said, just in one conversation, just blurted out a number and said, I'd like $80,000. And Mike took the phone call and said, okay, well, what's your restaurant? What are you trying to do? He's like, well, other towns are offering me this. And Mike's like, okay, but let's talk about how many, tables you're going to have, how big your space is. And he's like, we don't have a program set up for that yet, but we can talk if we get more information. We didn't hear back from them. Well, that restaurant ended up coming back to North Aurora, and without giving them a dime. So at some point, there's got to be, we think, some checks and balances in place before they get to the board. And in this case, what we would do is we would look at qualified and unqualified and first decide if the qualified use actually creates a benefit or some kind of incentive that would, it says here, meets all of our economic development incentive policy requirements, meaning it's not just about revenue sometimes, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, they're going to bring in a lot of sales tax, so we'll give them a portion of their sales tax back, but we'll also get sales tax out of this in the long run. It might be a use that doesn't bring any sales tax, but we still say it's qualified because it's fixing up a dilapidated property or building a vacant piece of farmland that's been sitting for 20 years and now putting, a storefront on it. So we vet it out, make sure it's got some benefit to it, see what type of reimbursement would apply, what type of incentive. Then we want to see if it aligns with the strategic plan. And that's pretty vague, but what it means is go to the strategic plan. We have a whole section of goals on economic development. We have goals on Route 31. And you look at that and say, our community vitality, are they meeting any of these goals? Is this use enhancing the village? And a lot of them will. So if it's a restaurant, boom. If it's a hotel, boom. Those 2 are easily, they're in our strategic plan already. They're in our economic development plan. So it just gives us another way to say, no, this is an absolute necessary incentive. It's a good use. We want to bring it forward. Unqualified, it still gives the staff the ability to bring an unqualified use forward. Once again, if it meets the strategic plan or creates a benefit to the village. But let's give an example here. Let's say it's a warehouse, but it's a warehouse in an area that's already surrounded by other warehouse, doesn't have any impact on the residential development around it. And this is just an example because we don't have many spaces left that are big enough for a warehouse. But let's just say it's in a TIF district. Well, the increment from a warehouse generates a gigantic amount of tax increment that can then be used for infrastructure improvements in the TIF district area. So that could be considered a benefit, even though it's an unqualified use. So we would look at it and say, you know what, the board may want to look at this. Or, hey, this warehouse does point of sales, and they do, you know, $200,000 in sales tax revenue a year out of that warehouse because they have a storefront attached to it that's where their point of sales are. So it gives us the ability to say, no, there's a direct benefit to the community or the village here to look as a whole and bring it back to the board. So those are the main changes, and then we just took out the language that would have been contradictory. And this is that step-by-step process that we have for when people submit. But if you see number 4, we basically just said after review is complete, it just now says once the village administrator determines there's value to bring forward, it gets brought forward. So that's the change. That's where we're at. And if anybody has any questions.
I'm fine with that.
No, I'm fine.
That's good.
Yeah, good.
All right. Anything else, Steve?
No, that's it.
Got that? All right. No exec session. Motion adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. All right. Good night, everyone.